Hi, and thank you so much for joining me today on this very special day. And what I wanted to do is have a brief conversation with both of you about, how we know each other and what it is you do that made your presence here today so special. I'll start with you. If you just want to give your name.
My name is Achim Albert, and I'm living in Kleinwaldstadt, a small town near Aschaffenburg, about 60 kilometers from here. And I'm interested in the history of the Jewish community in my hometown for about 35 years now. And what is it that you do? Do you study? Study the community? I started at school, at a work for school, about the history of the Jewish community in Kleinwaldstadt. Then there were many years I did nothing in this because less time, because of work and so on. I started again about 6 years ago. We had the first contact to families who their ancestries lived in Kleinwaldstadt, and so I started again to do some studies about the Jews in my hometown. And we got in contact because of a Facebook group, Yekes, so you invited me to come here
and
today.
I'm so glad you did, but can you just give us a little more information about what it is you were studying about the Jews? Was it the Jewish religion, or how Jews relate to non-Jews in your community?
It's especially, I started because I wanted to know and to understand what was the relationship between the citizens of Kleinwaldstadt and the Jewish community. To understand why they lived together for so long, and then they started to hate the Jews and to do a lot of crime. It started really in 1933 in Kleinwaldstadt that there were. That they did throw in the windows of the Jews, so they left very early. The Jews left Kleinwaldstadt. Some came to Frankfurt, Aschaffenburg, Frankfurt, Nürnberg, and so this was for me important to try to understand what had happened then.
And what is it like now? Are there many Jews living in your town?
There was only one family, after the war, only one family lived in Kleinwaldstadt for a few years, a Jewish family. But many of the Jews who lived in Kleinwaldstadt came back for visits, for short visits. Mm-hmm. But it was always the same. They never didn't tell anybody that they visited Kleinwaldstadt. So, they only visited some nuns in Kleinwaldstadt because the nuns were the only one who had them before.
And what about now? Are there any Jews living in the town? No?
No.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Greta Eberle-Kochanek, and I come from Renningen. This is near Stuttgart. And the meaning why I am here is the reason why I'm here. I started to research about my family. I come from the opposite side. I am the descendant of a perpetrator, and I met Judy due to a friend, a common friend of us, and he introduced us. And we wrote for several years on Facebook in the Messenger, and I found out about my grandfather that he was an SS man and a Nazi, and led deportations from Thessaloniki to Auschwitz over the balcony area for 3 years, and that was a very horrific result because never talked about the war, and he was a very silent man. He pulled himself back when the topic war came on the table, as we say in Germany. And I started to research after my mother gave me some documents, his Wehrpass, his Arbeitsbuch, his Soldbuch, how it is called in German. And so I found out, with help from others who supported me, that he really was a perpetrator. I couldn't believe that. It was so hard to believe that for me because I had grown up with him and I loved him very much. I still do, because I don't know if he was a convinced Nazi or if he was forced to do these things. But he cannot answer me these questions. He died when I was 21, and I started researching a few years ago when I was over 50. And
so you didn't know any of this until you were over 50?
No.
And when you say that he was he part of the SS?
He was part of the SS.
And when you say he was a perpetrator, can you tell us what he did in the war?
Not in special points, but I knew he led two bigger deportations from Thessaloniki to Auschwitz.
And how did he do that? What was his job?
His job was, he was a mechanic, and he was, 1942, he started as a freight train driver. And he had a freight train to drive with cattle cars from A to B, and it started in Thessaloniki, and later he was also in Croatia. And as I know, but this is not confirmed by documents, he had been in Katowice, because, as I was told by an archivar, the trains arrived firstly Katowice before they went to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and the drivers were substituted because they were on their way for 1 week, for example, and they were exhausted and they were tired. And I think these drivers should not see what has happened after they put, or what would happen after they put the mothers and children and everyone else to Birkenau.
So he would put people on the trains in Thessaloniki, Greece, and take them to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Except for the last few minutes when somebody else would take over.
First from Thessaloniki, but then later I was told he was in Katowice.
And how many people do you think that he transported?
Oh, I don't know. It is not confirmed, but the Jewish community in Thessaloniki was about 90,000 Jews. And I was told it was 60,000 Jews. Two big transports, but I have no documents and I don't know it. I tried to get them from the archives in Thessaloniki, but due to Corona and the COVID measures, it didn't function until now. But I will try it again.
Well, it's an amazing story, and when you
It's
found
a
this out,
horrific story, and it is a story most Germans who are definitely from German had or have. The soldiers died at the front, and others were SS men. Even the Wehrmacht in Babinja in Kiev had a great massacre of about 30,000 Jews. They all committed crimes, but it is hard to find out after the war if they were convinced Nazis. I don't know that. I knew my grandfather as a decent, lovely, warm-hearted man who was very silent, but that was the reason why I was so shocked. I needed 2-3 years to realize and puzzle a new picture of him together, and I'm still not ready with that because he was not the man I thought he was. He never spoke about the past.
but he was in the SS, That's confirmed. And as a result of you learning this about the grandfather you loved, did you do anything to
Yeah. I
change things?
I was at a point that I thought I have to do something positive with this knowledge. And so I'm now working in remembrance. I'm a member of a memorial. I am teaching children or students at school. And I'm trying to teach my own children about the past. And that our task is, and our duty is that it will never happen again. We cannot change what has happened, and I have met some very impressive persons like Ben Lesser, for example, and I had...
Can you explain who he is?
Ben Lesser is a survivor from Krakow. He lived in Poland before the war, and then he was deported. He left. He lost his whole family, about 28 persons, besides his sister, and he survived with a lot of luck, and he was in several concentration camps. And the day before Dachau was liberated, he came to Dachau, and then he was so sick that he fell into a coma, it is called in English also. And he must have rescued in, I think it is called St. Elisabethen. It was cloister, a monastery, is it called? A cloister? A cloister by nuns, monastery. And so he survived. And the fact which is unbelievable, he met his sister there. She was not met with him on the death walk. He and his cousin died on the day when they arrived Dachau, and he survived. And his sister was already in St. Elisabethen, and they met there. He didn't know that, but the whole family was dead, was murdered in the Holocaust. His parents were shot in Hungary, in Ungarn, Hungary, right? And yeah.
And you're also involved in the parkour?
He also?
You're also involved. Explain to us.
Yes. He has a foundation which is called Sachor, and I met him 5 years ago, and I made myself a ring with this word upon it. Sachor means always remember, never forget. And yesterday we both found out she has the pin of this organization, and I made myself a ring. I had pins in former times and I lost some of them, and so I wanted to have something I can wear every day.
So as a result of you finding out what you found out, you have made it your life's work to make sure that students know, children know, so that it never happens again.
Yes, it is important for us to know our past. It is painful in different ways. Your past is painful because you were the side of the victims. My past is painful because I had no choice, because I am a tolerant and not anti-Semitic or in any way intolerant person, and I cannot live with new rising anti-Semitism and intolerance in Germany, if it is about the refugees or the Jews or disabled persons or whatever. I think it is our task to be good persons, and it doesn't matter which religion we have. To me, it is absolutely doesn't matter which religion a person have. You don't need a religion to be a good person. You only have to be a good person.
Well, I certainly appreciate everything you've told us. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yes, I want to thank you so much for our friendship. It is so wonderful and amazing, and it should be a sign that communication can start again, and that we can see in the other person the pain, but also the friendship and the luck we have to be here. And it is difficult to live with all the knowledge, but we should take it into a positive thing. And
Very well.
and a friend of us, a common friend of us, wrote me one sentence the day before I went here, and he wrote, "Don't be afraid, this will be historical for you both." Yes, and
So right.
you know who I mean.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
Well, I am so blessed to have both of you in my life. And since I've known you longer, we'll start with you. You're Renata Rao. And can you tell us, for the sake of posterity, how you know me, how you know my mother, and the information that you found out when you went to the Nazi archives, and what you taught me?
I met your mother in 1993. She was on the program, Frankfurt visiting program, and I was part of Angelica's project group. And Angelica sent out questionnaires, right, to those people who were invited by Frankfurt magistrate, who would be ready to speak in Frankfurt at schools, at their former schools, about what happened to them, why they had to leave Frankfurt. And I saw on the list that your mother was a student at the Victoria Schule, Victoria School, which is now Bettina School. And my mother, her first teacher training year was at the Victoria Schule. So I thought, I knew from my mother that the headmaster of that school was a very bad Nazi, Dr. Gerber. And he kicked out his Jewish students already in 1935. And my mother was teacher trainee only in 1938, which I found out later. So I was glad that she was not at the school when the Jewish students were kicked out.
So my mother was one of his students, one of the ones that he kicked out.
He kicked out your mother, but that was already before my mother was a teacher, right? And, well, that's why I addressed your mother. And I wrote a long letter to her in the Frankfurter Hof, and I felt so guilty. I don't remember what I wrote, but I think your mother, she felt pity for me. That when she realized I felt such guilt for what the Germans did to Jewish and the Frankfurters did to the Jews. And that's how we became friends. And I made an interview with her, and I took her to her former school. Well, that's about all I have to say at the moment.
Well, then you met me about 7 or 8 years ago. Well, you had met me before.
When you, right.
But you were also my sponsor, so you already knew the family history. But do you remember asking me why I named my daughter Martine? Do you remember that conversation? And I told you that I named her after my beloved grandmother, Martha Bodenheimer. And do you remember what you told me? And I was shocked.
But her first name was really Amanda, yeah?
So
I suppose I only found out later.
it's amazing to me because my mother was alive and knew what I was going to name her. And there's so many things about my life about which I knew nothing. And you remember that before I came to the visitor program, that you informed me that I had a relative living in Germany?
Right, yeah, Gabriela, right.
And Gabriella was the granddaughter of Ludolf, the opera singer, right?
Right, and your mother, she told me about her favorite uncle, the opera singer. And that's why I did some research, where could he ended up, this opera singer, right? And somehow I saw the name. I knew that he had changed his name from Bodenheimer to Bottmer, so it wouldn't sound Jewish, I suppose. And that's how I found out Gabriele Bottmer, and she lived in Munich. But she had lived in Frankfurt before. That's what she wrote then. For many years she had lived in Frankfurt, and she had moved to Munich. That's how I found out. And I think I wrote to her, I sent an email telling her about your mother. And she wrote a letter to your mother, which shocked your mother completely.
In what way?
She attacked your mother for asking after her favorite uncle so late. Why didn't you ask after or look for him after the war, right away after the war? 45, 46, then he would still have lived. And she wrote to her that he had survived the war at the Chiemsee Lake, hidden somewhere. And your mother was really also shocked for this attack. It was really an attack.
Well, because you told me about her before I came to the program. I came a week early, had a train ticket, so when I landed in Frankfurt, I was going to take the train to Munich. It sounds like it's a common thing here, just like in Boston, there was a train strike. So I found a driver who drove me halfway, and it turned out to be the best thing because I got to stay in the most adorable little town, October. So I spent the night there, and the driver said that that's where he lived, but he would take me the next day the rest of the way. And he then drove me, and I asked if we could stop at Dachau so I could see the camp. And he asked if he could walk through it with me. And he cried harder than I did. It was such a moving, painful experience. Then he took me on to Munich, where I met Gabrielle, and she looked so much like my mother. It was hard to distinguish the two. But I was supposed to stay for a week, but I only stayed for a day. And then I left, came back up here. But you certainly enlightened me with information about which I had no knowledge, and never would had it not been for you. So I thank you for that and for your friendship.
It was also very moving for myself to meet your mother and you.
And you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Angelika Riva. I studied history and politics and started about 50 years ago with a research about the Nazi period. And the reason why I did this was my parents did not talk much about their past. I was curious, and I was a young teacher and wanted to teach the Holocaust in a way which touches the students, not far away in Auschwitz or wherever. I wanted to do research about what happened here in Frankfurt, and I wanted to do research about people who tell their story. And at the beginning, I started with the resistors, because they lived here, and then invited them to come to school, and partly they were of Jewish origin. And so they introduced me to the Frankfurt Invitation Program. The city invited every year former Frankfurt citizens to come back to their home country again for 2 weeks. And from, I think, 85 on.
When you say former Frankfurt citizens, you mean Jews?
Yes, not only Jews, but also political resistors who are re-invited to come to the city again. And since I think 85, I started to interview these visitors together with other people who worked with a project like Renate. And there was one in 89 who said, I want to speak in a school. And from this time on, we developed a program how to prepare the visitors, ourselves, and the students, because we did not know these persons before, and then invite them to go to the school. So we developed a program of preparation and organization, and also reflection of what has happened. And then in 2015 we started with a website, because the survivors of the Holocaust, only a few are left. And so the city of Frankfurt luckily started to invite the descendants, like you. And for me, this is very fascinating, because I met your mother, she met your mother, and this is also in the case where I go to afterwards. So I met aunts and parents before, and now I met their children, and it's so important to exchange what I experienced with the parents and what you experience with your parents. And sometimes it's very similar, and sometimes we have different perspectives. We look at it differently. Yes, and we have a lot of interviews made in the last 40 years. And so we started to have a website where we present the stories, and the story of your family will be presented there soon. So this is the work I'm doing. And it's a very intensive work, very fulfilling, and very exciting. And it's exciting to see you being here, initiating the Stolpersteine for your parents, and I'm happy to be able to take part and also help with research. And so I think it changed now that we will more exchange now. Before we asked your parents, but now it's more an exchange with this next generation.
That's what I learned, because the expectation for my invite, and I suppose for the next generation, is to go to the schools, but not to discuss the Holocaust, but to have an exchange of ideas. Because I remember I was invited to speak here at Bettina Schule, and it's such a shame that the Holocaust Memorial is closed for today. But anyway, it was very interesting in this school, because the students were so excited and so eager, because what was I going to tell them? I didn't live through this. My mother told them her story. So I would ask them questions. In other words, could this happen again? Could it have been prevented? I asked all sorts of things that made them really think. And I found it a wonderful experience. And after I spoke with the students, they wanted to show me their rooms. And 4 of them ran away, and I thought they were gone, but they came back about 5 minutes later and said, we have to tell you something. And I said, what? And they said, we want you to know that we feel so much guilt for what our parents and grandparents did to your families. And here they are, it's another generation for them. They weren't involved in it. But guilt seems to be a word that a lot of Germans seem to use. But interestingly, as part of this program, in addition to speaking at this school, somebody was supposed to speak at another school and couldn't. So I was asked to speak at a school in the suburbs.
Yes, Liebesschule.
Liebesschule, and it was a very, very different experience because it was a mixture. It was a very multicultural group, and they were hostile to me. And the first person said, well, if you were so interested in us, what took you so long to get here? And I explained to them that this was part of a program, that I needed to apply, and it took several years, and how happy I was to be here. And the next person said, well, why should we have to pay for Israel just because of what happened to your parents? And then I looked at the person that was with me, the sponsor, and I said, I think that this isn't working out as well as I had hoped, so let's end it here. But I did find it a wonderful experience speaking to students. I'd love to come back and do it again.
It's very important for the students. You just said that they still have guilt feelings, although they don't have a personal guilt.
Right.
And there is a second tendency to refuse responsibility. And so we have to deal with both facets and help them to find a way to deal with the past, to accept that it happened, and to accept that there is a responsibility to remember. And encounters with people like you help them to reflect. And what we developed in the program is to have follow-up questions for the students, that they reflect what happened with them when they met you. And there is the responsibility of the teachers to also confront themselves and the students with own prejudice or negative images or stereotypes. And so the work we are doing is not only remembering what happened in the past, but really to deal with images and prejudice, and to help everyone, not only the young ones, to be tolerant, to accept different perspectives and different opinions.
And
so
teach them
it's
that
very
hopefully it won't
helpful.
happen again. And to teach them that hopefully this will not happen.
Definitely. Yeah, and to be aware of not only what happened in America or is going on in America, to be sensitive, to look at things which are going on, to stand up if something goes wrong. And so to meet people like you encourages them to do so through the story of your parents and their experiences and your own as well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you both taking the time to speak.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
That's what all the women said, right?
Yes.
Here is my mother's synagogue, no longer the same.
Okay.